Have you ever stopped to think that behind the great empires of history, there were hidden spiritual authorities waging invisible wars while kings made decisions that would change the world? In Daniel chapter 10, one of the most mysterious texts in the Bible, we are introduced to figures like the Prince of Persia and the Prince of Greece, spiritual entities that govern behind the scenes of human kingdoms. But the most striking thing is that these figures may be key pieces in the global system being prepared for the Antichrist. What Daniel saw was just the beginning, and what is to come goes beyond what many imagine. Daniel's celestial vision and the invisible battle. Chapter 10 of the book of Daniel is one of the most fascinating and spiritually charged passages in the entire Bible. After 3 weeks of fasting and prayer, Daniel, already advanced in age, receives a vision of celestial proportions. He was on the banks of the Tigris River when a glorious figure appeared to him, eyes like flaming torches, a face like lightning, and a voice like the roar of a multitude. This description echoes other celestial manifestations throughout Scripture, resembling the vision of the glorified Christ in Revelation chapter 1. Many scholars debate whether this being was Christ himself in a theophany or the angel Gabriel, who had previously been sent to him. While Daniel remained alone to witness the vision, the men with him felt great fear and fled, though they saw nothing. This demonstrates that the spiritual realm can be perceived even without a visible manifestation. The prophet was left without strength, prostrate, and needed to be touched by the being to stand. When Daniel finally heard the message, it was revealed that the answer to his prayer had been sent from the first day he humbled himself before God. However, the messenger had been delayed for 21 days by the Prince of the Kingdom of Persia, a powerful spiritual entity. This conflict reveals a staggering truth. There is an ongoing spiritual war in the heavens, fought between God's messengers and the powers of darkness. Paul's letter to the Ephesians, in chapter 6, verse 12, confirms this reality, stating that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness of this world, and spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Daniel was a silent witness to this invisible war, where human prayers move celestial forces, and persistence in intercession opens paths to spiritual victories. This narrative unveils a dimension of spirituality that many ignore, the direct impact of prayer in the supernatural realm. The time Daniel spent fasting and crying out was not in vain. Each day of prayer was a battle fought in the heavens, and the delay in the response did not mean God's absence, but rather fierce spiritual resistance. Daniel's experience shows that heaven moves in response to the cries of the saints, and every knee bowed can unleash celestial battles of cosmic proportions. The Prince of Persia, a territorial spirit with geopolitical influence. The figure of the Prince of the Kingdom of Persia is not merely a poetic metaphor or political symbol, it is a real spiritual entity endowed with territorial authority, operating in the heavenly realms to directly influence earthly events. Biblical and apocryphal literature, as well as patristic writings and rabbinic commentaries, support the idea that each nation is under the influence of spiritual beings, whether angels sent by God or fallen principalities in rebellion. In the case of Persia, one of the most powerful empires of the ancient world, the spiritual opposition was strong enough to detain a celestial messenger for 21 days. This spirit did not operate merely as an agent of chaos, but as a cosmic strategist, manipulating kings, advisors, and decrees. When we examine the historical period, we see the rise of Cyrus the Great, whose policy toward the Jews was initially favorable. However, soon after the return of some exiles and the beginning of the temple's reconstruction, there was intense opposition, both human and spiritual. Writings like Ezra and Nehemiah reveal coordinated resistance to prevent the restoration of worship to God. Thus, the Prince of Persia was not only hindering an angelic visit, but fighting a spiritual movement of restoration. This notion of territorial spirits was also addressed in the writings of the Church Fathers, such as Origen and Augustine, who saw the world as a battlefield between fallen angels and God's angels, each operating in specific regions. In theological studies, this idea was revisited by authors like A.W. Pink and Derek Prince, who explored how certain regions of the world exhibit patterns of behavior, religiosity, oppression, and idolatry, all sustained by spiritual forces. By revealing this prince, Daniel offers us a glimpse into this organized, millennia-old hierarchy of darkness. The reality is that these principalities do not operate alone, but with demonic networks acting in various spheres: political, religious, cultural, and economic. They shape entire cultures, generate systems of thought, and provoke conflicts that seem merely human but have deep spiritual roots. The Apostle John, in his first epistle, declares that the whole world lies under the sway of the evil one, 1 John 5 verse 19, reinforcing this invisible yet real structure of control. What Daniel shows us is that behind imperial decisions, there are spiritual voices and forces trying to thwart God's purposes. Michael, the celestial prince of Israel. The figure of Michael as one of the chief princes is one of the most powerful expressions of the angelic role in the history of salvation. He is not just another angel among many. Michael is a celestial warrior, a defender of God's people, mentioned in critical moments in both the Old and New Testaments. In the book of Daniel, his role stands out as the direct protector of Israel. The angel who appears to Daniel says that the only help against the prince of Persia was Michael, highlighting that there is a balance of forces in the heavens, a true cosmic battle between light and darkness, between divine order and spiritual rebellion. Michael appears elsewhere in Scripture. In Jude, verse 9, he contends with Satan over the body of Moses, and in Revelation chapter 12, he leads the celestial armies in the war against the dragon, a figure representing Satan. These appearances indicate that Michael is directly involved in moments of spiritual transition in history: the Exodus, prophetic revelation, and the end times. He is described as the one who fights for the nations, but with a special mission focused on Israel. In Daniel chapter 12, he is mentioned again as the great prince who will arise in the time of the end, when there will be distress like never before since nations existed, indicating that Michael is also a key prophetic figure in the eschatological scenario. Jewish tradition, including the Talmud and Midrashim, recognizes Michael as the advocate of Israel before God. He is the one who presents the merits of the people and constantly intercedes, even in the face of the chosen people's failures. In patristic writings, theologians like St. Jerome and St. Gregory the Great understood Michael as the archangel of divine justice, a true commander of the heavenly army. He acts in moments when God's direct intervention manifests through spiritual warfare. The battle involving Daniel's messenger is one such intervention, where Michael had to step in to break the evil resistance blocking divine revelation. This scenario points to a profound truth: God's promises to his people are not fulfilled without resistance. There is a spiritual confrontation that must be fought, and God, in his sovereignty, raises spiritual warriors to ensure his plans are not thwarted. Michael represents heaven's faithfulness to the covenant with Israel, a faithfulness that persists to this day and will reach its climax in the Great Tribulation, when Michael will once again rise to defend the holy people. The Prince of Greece, prophecy of a new empire under spiritual dominion. When the celestial messenger mentions that after the Prince of Persia, the Prince of Greece would come, he is clearly announcing a prophetic and spiritual movement that transcends historical events. The Greek Empire had not yet emerged as a dominant power in Daniel's time, but the heavens already recognized the spiritual preparation behind its future rise. This demonstrates that earthly empires arise in response to previously established spiritual dynamics, decisions, permissions, and conflicts in the heavens that shape the course of history. This Prince of Greece was not Alexander the Great, but a spiritual entity representing Hellenistic dominion, just as the Prince of Persia represented the previous empire. The mission of this territorial spirit was to pave the way for a new cultural, philosophical, and political system, imbued with humanistic values often contrary to divine revelation. Greek culture was essential in shaping the Hellenized world that existed in the days of Jesus and the apostles. The use of the Greek language as a lingua franca, philosophy, ideals of beauty, rationality, and freedom, all these elements were promoted and spread by this empire and were deeply influenced by this spiritual principality. Early Christian writers, such as Irenaeus of Lyons, commented on the role of spiritual powers in the great cultural movements of history. He argued that these corrupted principalities introduced subtle and deceptive ideas that drew people away from the true God, and Greek philosophy, despite its intellectual value, was often used as an instrument to undermine faith in the one God. The spirit of Greece introduced the idea of a self-sufficient human, capable of attaining truth through reason, marginalizing the need for divine revelation. This created a spiritual atmosphere conducive to future heresies and anti-Christian systems. Thus, the emergence of the Prince of Greece was not merely the succession of an empire, but the establishment of a new spiritual paradigm in the ancient world, a worldview that exalted human knowledge but prepared the ground for the conflict between faith and reason that would extend into modern times. This same spirit, in an updated form, still influences contemporary systems of thought, universities, governments, and media, shaping the world to resist the absolute truth of God. Global spiritual structure, foreshadowing the Antichrist's rule. Daniel's revelation about spiritual princes acting over nations is not an isolated event, but the unveiling of a cosmic model of governance that reaches its climax in the figure of the Antichrist. The princes of Persia and Greece are examples of a larger mechanism, where each territory and empire has spiritual agents operating behind the scenes. When we cross-reference this with the revelations in the book of Revelation, we see a system being meticulously prepared over centuries, an invisible structure that governs the visible. This model of spiritual influence that shapes empires and cultures did not cease in Daniel's time. On the contrary, it has evolved, refined, and globalized. The Apostle John, in Revelation chapter 13, describes the beast that rises from the sea, with authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. This beast does not appear out of nowhere. It is the product of centuries of spiritual preparation, where principalities and powers shape values, economic systems, political ideologies, and even global spirituality to ensure everything is ready for the Antichrist's absolute dominion. The world is moving toward unified governance, and this unification will not be merely administrative, it will be spiritual. The beast will receive power, a throne, and great authority from the dragon, a direct reference to Satan, Revelation 13 verse 2. This connects us back to Daniel's princes. If they were already hindering and influencing imperial decisions, the Antichrist will be the embodiment of a global authority that synthesizes all these powers. He will not merely be a charismatic politician, but an agent fully aligned with the territorial spirits that have been operating in the world for millennia. Authors like A.W. Tozer and Leonard Ravenhill warned about the subtle preparation of the masses for this moment. Through culture, entertainment, politics, and religion, there is a homogenization of thought that rejects biblical truth and embraces relativistic values. This global structure that Daniel glimpsed in its early stages, and that John described at the culmination of Revelation, is being built before our eyes. The warning is not to fear, but to discern the times, for the same Michael who stood for Israel will also be the warrior who fights in the final war described in heaven, Revelation 12, when the heavens and the earth are utterly shaken. What Daniel witnessed in his vision was a glimpse of a spiritual reality that continues to operate behind the scenes to this day: invisible princes, celestial wars, and a global system in construction, preparing for the final climax of human history. If this stirred you, imagine what we'll uncover together in the upcoming videos. So, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share this content with someone you love. Spread this revelation further. Here, our commitment is to spiritual truth and the growth of your faith. May God bless and strengthen you on this journey.